Hello, and welcome to aha-vts.com Clipcast on Basic HSRP Setup. My name is Alim H. And oh, by the way, I'm this handsome gentleman to the right. Now, HSRP is a Cisco proprietary protocol, which stands for Hot Standby Routing Protocol. And in my opinion, it's not necessarily a routing protocol per se, but more of a redundant virtual router that exists on a network that resides in a physical router if configured to take part in the HSRP functionality. It entails the usage of a set of router interfaces working together to present the appearance of a single virtual router or default gateway to the host on a LAN or LAN segment. Now, obviously, the virtual router doesn't exist. It only represents the common target for routers that are configured to provide backups to each other. In saying that, one router, the primary, is selected to be the HSRP active router, and the other, in this case the secondary, is to be the HSRP standby router. The HSRP active router will assume the control of the group's MAC address and IP address. And if the primary router fails, well, the secondary router, the HSRP standby router, will assume the functionality of the HSRP active router. So let's take a look at the diagram. Shown on the screen is a LAN segment to which I have a set of hosts connected to a switch. This access tier switch is then connected to two collapsed core routers that are destinating traffic outside of our local area to this cloud of sorts. What we're going to do is configure HSRP on these routers in order to provide the host with a path to the outside network regardless of which router is actually doing the path determination. As logic dictates, I'll be using router 2 as the primary router to the outside world and router 3 as the secondary. Therefore, router 2 will be the HSRP active router and router 3 will be the HSRP standby router. So let me jump onto router 2 and enter the following syntax. Okay, so I'm going to config T and then go into the interface that'll participate in HSRP, which is interface fast Ethernet 0/0. Going to enter standby followed by the group number 10. Then the IP address of our virtual router, which is 172.16.0.1. I'm going to follow this up with the preempt keyword. Now the preempt is used in the event that router 2 fails. Router 3 will assume the responsibility as the active router. Now once router 2 becomes online again, it will assume the responsibility as the active standby router. I'm also going to add just the priority of router 2 to be 110. By default, the priority is 100, but I want to make a distinction between router 2 and router 3. So let us wait here for a status message to let us know that HSRP is active on router 2. And here it is, the HSRP state changed from standby to active. So currently, router 2 is the active HSRP router. But before we go ahead and configure router 3, let's issue a show standby command. And here we see the state is active for router 2. We also see the virtual IP address and MAC address. We also see the hello timer and the hold on timer, the preemption status as enabled for router 2, and the active router is local. Again, this is router 2, and the standby router is unknown since we haven't configured router 3 to be the standby HSRP router, and the priority to be 110. So let's go ahead and configure router 3 as a standby HSRP router. I'll be entering the following syntax. Okay, so let's go under the interface. I'll participate in HSRP. Again, it is fast Ethernet 0/0. I'm going to issue the standby group number 10, then the IP address again of our virtual router, 172.16.0.1. I'm going to issue the preempt in this case. And we don't have to, but we'll enter it. And that's it. Now, normally you wouldn't get a status message to let you know that the HSRP standby router is standby. So let's just wait a few seconds before we issue the show standby command. Okay, I think enough time has passed. So let's do a show standby. And let's see what we have here. And we see some differences from the show standby command on router 2. Well, the first is the state is now standby. And we have the virtual IP address and the virtual MAC address, which is the same on router 2. The hello timer and hold on timers are the same. Preemption is also enabled. But look here, the active router is 172.16.0.2, which happens to be router 2, and the priority is 110. In parentheses, you see the expiration in 9.332 seconds. That dictates the hold on timer to which router 3 will listen for hello messages from router 2. We see the standby router is local, hence router 3. So let's go ahead and test the HSRP functionality. The first thing we're going to do is ping my PC's default gateway of 172.16.0.1. Then we're going to fail router 2 to make router 3 the active HSRP router, and we should see a slight delay with respect to my local PC's default status. And last, we're going to reconnect router 2 so it can assume its functionality as the active router via the preemption we configured. So let me go ahead and call up my command prompt, and I'm going to issue a ping command on 172.16.0.1. I'm going to extend it out for a bit so we can see that it's pinging its default gateway. Okay, so it's pinging its default gateway right now, and I am going to stand up and walk over to router 2 connection to my switch, and I'm going to pull it out, and let's see what happens. We should see a status message now on router 3 that states that it will assume the active HSRP function. And you can see that router 3 has just assumed the active HSRP function, while my command prompt for my PC, you notice there's 2 timeout requests as it's moving. That was roughly about 2 seconds. So right now, router 3 is the active HSRP router, and we're still continuously pinging the default gateway. So now I'm going back over to router 2, and I'm going to connect it back into the switch, and let's see what happens. Alright, it's connected back. We should see another status message in a second. Notice the ping kind of halted for a quick second. Router 3, another status message. It went from active to standby. I guess the delay between the pings on the local PC is about maybe a half a second to a second. So currently right now we're still pinging our default gateway, and by the status message we can see that router 3 went from active back to standby. Well, let's do a show standby command here and see what's going on. Okay. Right now, again, router 2 has assumed its functionality as the active router, and we're continuously pinging our default gateway. So let's recap. We talked about what is HSRP, and we configured HSRP on the diagram shown below. I hope this clipcast on basic HSRP setup was informative, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.